My name is Stefan Dohr. I'm the principal horn of the Berlin Philharmonic, and this is Living the Classical Life.
Today we travel to the seaside resort city of Pärnu, located in Estonia on the Baltic Sea and popular in the region as a holiday destination with its many beaches, restaurants, and hotels. With its distinctive tree-lined streets and old wooden architecture, the city was the summer home to violinist David Oistrakh, who gathered his musician friends to play together in his green dacha. It's here that we catch up with Stefan Dohr, principal horn of the Berlin Philharmonic, to have a candid conversation about what it means to be a musician today. We thank you for your support of the show, which enabled us to travel to the Pärnu Music Festival. Stefan, welcome to Living the Classical Life. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
So, I'm excited to have this opportunity to speak with you because I know that many of my musical friends and colleagues would look at you and say, okay, you got your first, Frankfurt opera at age 19. Now you're principal at the Berlin Philharmonic. They might look at you and say, well, he was just always good at the audition process, and so he's lucky and I'm not.
I wasn't. I did some terrible auditions. I was really afraid of playing in auditions. I was never a horn player that did win competitions. My biggest prize was third prize in Magneukirchen horn competition. So I actually was never really a good audition or competition player. Luckily, I had a good day in 1993 in Berlin to get this job. But when I was starting very young at 19 in Frankfurt, I think this gave me a lot of routine. I stayed there for 6 years, and then I went to Nice to the orchestra, and then Deutsche Symphonieorchester before I got the job in Berlin. So I was collecting very young a lot of experience.
But at the age of 19, I mean, if I think of myself, I still had more years of school left to finish.
I did not finish my high school. So in Germany, you can study after 10 years of high school. You can study arts and music. So I did study 3 years. And then what I actually did, I did the audition actually because I did not want to finish my studies, because then I would have had to go to the army at that time. So I was like trying to get a good job so that I didn't have to go to Bundeswehr.
So maybe it was that motivation alone that made you
Absolutely.
focus. Okay, but let's take the audition process for the Berlin Philharmonic. You went in, obviously feeling like you weren't good at the process, but you found some way to focus enough that you could go through, I'm going to guess, a multi-hour, multi-day process?
Not multi-day, because on the principal horn at that time, there were not so many players. There were like a lot of open positions. So I think we were like 8 or 9 people in the final. And I remember that at that time, I think we had to play the whole Strauss concerto, number 1, not number 2, what I'm playing here now. And then we were 3 horn players in the second round. And we were all sitting on stage, and one after the other playing orchestra excerpts. So, but like one started Tchaikovsky 5, the other 2 played. Then the other one started, I can't remember, Symphony Call or whatever. So you could sometimes you could hear what the others were playing before you. Sometimes you had to play first. So that was a very interesting process. We don't do that anymore. But I think for me it was actually not too bad because I could hear what the others were playing. So like, okay, let me try something different.
That's the unavoidable question, is that we're trying to grow, develop our own voice, our confidence, and yet there's always a question of how do I compare to others?
No, I think it was just like, okay, I want to present myself and what I can do and my personality in a different way, or in that way that I'm myself.
It doesn't sound like you overthought it like I do.
No, I definitely did not. I'm a horn player.
Okay. So then, in that moment, now that you're at the point where you are, and you go regularly onto stage as the principal horn, you've found a way to get into your ideal performance zone. Do you have ways of doing that, or it's just always been natural to you?
It has gotten even easier in the last, 10, 15 years. So I play more solo concerts than I did when I was younger. Now it is more like, okay, I need to work more on keeping in shape, like physically with muscles and breathing and things like this. With age, that doesn't get easier. Mm-hmm. But of course, the experience help. I mean, if you play your first Bruckner 4 in the Berlin Philharmonic, is very, very different to the, let's say, 12s or 10s or whatever. So you know exactly what to expect, you know how to prepare, you know how to, mentally go there and just like be focused on the solos and you know what you can risk, and you try out risking things in the rehearsal so that you have ability in the concert.
You mentioned breathing, and if I think of myself ahead of a performance, I notice that the first thing to start to get irregular is my breathing.
Yeah.
And I think nerves on stage, that could be obviously a problem for an instrument like yours.
Yeah. Breathing helps.
Yeah, breathing helps. So how does that factor into your, obviously we all run into stressful situations on stage. Sometimes it's going to be more, sometimes it's going to be less. If you know it's going to be more, do you have some strategies as to, does it begin with awareness?
It begins with awareness. It begins with really, and this is, I'm not kidding, breathing. It is just relaxing the shoulders, getting shoulders back, because what you do is when you're getting nervous, it's like you're afraid of something. So you close your body and sort of like go into the defense mode, and getting all of that, just try to open up. So like, okay, just this is it. I'm presenting myself. I can do it. This is how it works. I'm not doing a lot of other things. I'm not doing mental training or things like this. But with the amount of concerts I play, this is sort of like, okay, this is concert mode.
Well, I hear that a lot from my colleagues, that if you give one recital in a year, then everything rests on that one performance, and you're performing.
Of course. Yeah, I couldn't do that.
But what about all the travel? So you've just come back from Bangkok, and you only had a few days there. Then you had to hop on the plane to come back. That fatigue takes a toll, especially with age. I'm already feeling it. So I mean, do you have any strategies for dealing with that? Are you good at it?
I before Corona, I think I was quite good. Now I'm not as good. I found out recently that I need a week to recover from going to the States or going to the States or like to Asia. Going out, going for long walks always helped me. But if you go to Bangkok and try to go for a long walk beginning of July in Bangkok, you just die. It's like 36 degrees with 99% of humidity. So it's like, oh yeah, I can't do it. So yeah, try to be aware of times and not to waste too much time in the night to watch something. Usually I take a book to go back to sleep. Take some boring books.
But I heard you say earlier that some aspects of this get a little bit easier with time. Is that true? I mean, for some performers I've spoken to, they say that the stresses and the nerves become a little bit more challenging because they start to become aware of their own expectations of themselves. But it sounds like some aspects are becoming easier for you.
Yeah, I think some absolutely, because with how many times you have played this and this particular piece, these pieces become easier in a way, or more difficult because you compare them, how you played them a couple of years ago. But sort of like, no, the experience helps a lot. You can focus and, you remember, okay, if something goes right there, you really you need in the concert to be absolutely, totally 100,000,000% there at this second, because that's tricky, or this is like, yeah, that didn't go well last time or whatever.
I wanted to briefly switch gears and ask you, for the benefit of my friends and colleagues who are students, many of them are on the audition circuit for months or years. Sometimes they'll find that they have a musical or technical slump. They don't have the inspiration. They find it hard to practice every day. Mm-hmm. For the times in your life that were more challenging, I guess the word that's being used these days is grit, meaning the passion sustained over an extended period of time with a strategy to sustain it. Mm-hmm. Were there any ways that got you through your more difficult times?
There was a time when I was in Nice in the orchestra, and that was actually a wonderful orchestra and wonderful time, but I did not want to stay in Nice because it is not the center of the music, and chamber music and things like this were not available in that way. So I really wanted to go on. And I really took the time and practiced a lot of things that were not the audition things, just to become technically better and really demanding pieces. So I practiced a lot in that time. And then coming back to the audition pieces, sometimes it was easier, because then, technically, you have solved the problems that you had actually by getting the harder pieces done. That helped me a lot, I have to say. So in this time, it was really helpful to just I go to reach for the next level and just drop the other level first and then go back. I mean, the obsession now, a lot of students, especially in the States, obsessed with orchestra excerpts. But actually, the orchestra excerpts are only the final result of what you can play and what you are as a musician, and then you can play them. But you don't start with orchestra excerpts. I would not recommend that.
But what about impostor syndrome? You earned these big positions from an early age. Did you feel ready to be in those shoes? A lot of people... Okay, look, I'll give you an example. Some of my friends recently, about a dozen of them, have gotten orchestral positions. Mm-hmm. Then they go through the probation process to see if they can get the tenure. And I think for the average person, they don't realize that that's part of the equation as well. So then they get really insecure about it. Then they get the imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? And then they're analyzing every aspect of not just their playing, but their relationship to the colleagues. And then they start doing the overthinking thing.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that, especially if you just enter your first orchestra. When I was so young, and I was very lucky because I had a very, very nice horn section in the opera in Frankfurt, because otherwise I wouldn't have survived sight reading 25 operas. Just sight reading, no rehearsals, most of them. So Bohème, Tosca, Freischütz, everything, Aida, one piece after the other, just sitting on the first horn, never any rehearsal. Yeah. And your colleagues is now too late.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
You don't even have the time to think about anything. It's just like you're so stressed. It's like, okay, yeah, you can look at it. And the CDs were quite expensive, so I bought LPs. But then finding the right moments on a record player is like, yeah. So you just like take the score and try to find your part and listen to something. It's like, was quite a gamble. So I was lucky enough that the horn section was really, really taking care of me. And also the principal conductor in this time was Messiaen, and somehow he was giving me the chance. And there was a new ring cycle in the time. So all these like, yeah, big things for him too. Like having a principal horn was like under 20. It's like, okay. But he was taking the risk. And I tried my best to fit in. And in an opera orchestra, I think it's like, yeah, the colleagues say the things very directly. Yeah. It's not like you have to pay attention to what you talk about. No, it's like, no, this was, do this, do this, do this.
So one theme that is emerging for me with my conversations with musicians, performers who had other performers in their family, meaning their parents, for example, somehow their lives became easier by default. They internalized certain things. Did you come from a musical family?
My mother's a piano teacher, but she didn't perform so much. So it's like, she did with, but not as much as I, or not comparable at all. So I think, no, I did not. My father was a painter, an artist, so no, definitely not a performer.
Did you feel like you had to figure these things out for yourself, what it means to perform? I'm thinking about musicians like Yehudi Menuhin. He as a young boy, he was performing very naturally, and then once he started to overthink it, he said it became almost impossible.
No, I think the way I did go through is like when I started in the orchestra in Frankfurt, beside of this work in the orchestra, I always did a lot of chamber music, and I did a lot of ensemble modern, for example, contemporary music. Things like where you are very exposed sometimes and very difficult pieces, and it's like, but you see the others around, they did it for a longer time than me, but it's like, and they were part of the group. I was always an extra, but so then this process of working really hard in rehearsals, contemporary music, and then perform it. So like that gave me also more security on my classical and romantic repertoire somehow.
When you were growing up, did you feel like you even knew what a musical life would look like? I mean, I'm thinking about a lot of my friends, say, at the gym. Yeah. I think they regard my life as a classical musician as totally weird. I mean, there are other reasons why they think I'm totally weird, but I mean, I describe my life, and they're like, what? That sounds so unnatural.
I actually, before I went to Frankfurt, I played in Gelsenkirchen, what is a quite small town, Schalke, the football club is there. And I played there for 4 months, second and fourth horn when I was 17. So I knew about what the musician's life was, but not as I live it now, of course, because I didn't have the chamber music and the solo and, this really fantastic opportunities to meet all these great people.
Whose idea was it to start music?
I mean, I'm one of 3 brothers, and I'm the only one that studied music, actually. So I think I was having a very, very good first horn teacher. And I think he, took care that I didn't get my kid too fast at the beginning. So he was really very careful. But he sent me to a lot of youth orchestras and things like this, chamber music. And that was then, the seed was planted.
What was his approach to teaching and to lessons? Was he mostly focused on technique? Did he give lots of emphasis on musicianship? Was he giving you coachings about performance?
At that time, that was between 10 and 16 or something. That was just a very natural way of taking care that you do the right things with. You can do a lot of damage if you don't do the right thing at the horn from the beginning, or at every wind or brass instrument. So if you don't find the position right, the muscles right, everything. But he had a very natural way in calmly, saying no, wait, don't play these high notes now, they're uncontrolled. Just we build up slowly, and then put 3 students together, let them all play things. So it just was more play, experience, and enjoying music.
Well, it's one thing to start out on an instrument and have a good teacher, but then it's another thing to decide that this is going to be your life. Obviously, the passion took over at some point. Were you aware of that at a specific moment?
I think when I was like 15, 16, and I was playing this youth orchestra, and like, okay, this is really something I want to do that as a profession. I mean, my father was then going to my horn teacher and said, "Is that really a good idea to not finish school?" And he was like, "Don't worry, we'll be fine. No problem."
But I mean, could you have imagined when you started out that you would be in the Berlin Philharmonic?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So what did that feel like when you got the job?
It felt, first of all, because it is at that time for me it looked like a monster job, and it is a big job. You have to go out there 3 times a week playing Mahler 5 or Bruckner 4 or whatever symphony comes up, Heldenleben or yeah. So it is like there's a mountain of like feelings that you get when you get the job, but then when you go into rehearsals and the rehearsal process 4 weeks starts, then it's sort of like, oh yeah, of course I have to be the most prepared in the section or in the whatever in the orchestra, because I have 2 years of probation, so better be prepared. But I was in orchestras already like for 8 years, so I knew how to work and how to do it most of the times.
I know that each musician is different, but in terms of finding your winning formula for daily work, does your day get structured in a specific way, or do you follow how you feel in a moment? Right now, I feel like I'm going to practice the first movement of the Strauss concerto. Oh, today I don't want to practice at this hour. You see, that's already thinking it through quite a bit. How do you balance your daily life?
The structure of my days when I'm in Berlin is usually taken by the Philharmonic rehearsals. So and I'll try to be there about an hour before rehearsal starts. So I'm warming up and I do some daily exercises. Warming up means I do actually, I repeat the same exercise to begin with every time, just to see where my physics is, where like, how would my lip feel if they're stiff, if they are loose, whatever. And then I adjust my daily exercises to that. So I do prepare quite a lot before rehearsals and concerts. I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's obviously a lot of work. But what about the expression "all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy"? I mean, how do you find balance in your life?
I don't know if I have a balanced life. I don't think so. Do I want a balanced life? Maybe not.
It would be less interesting for a musician. But obviously we have to not go crazy.
No, that's true. I have a dog. My dog is 13 years old now. I have got 4 children. They're all grown up now. And 2 are already more or less working. So it is, that was a long time I was having a family life with, house, children, things. The moment it's a bit different, and there's a lot of things, of course, that now not being with the family for 4 or 5 years is different, but also, and then in between Corona hit, so that was a very difficult time. Not only for the orchestra, at the beginning it was like nobody knew when we would perform again, things like this. But it made me, I was coming from a tour from London, Slovenia, Italy, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, to nothing. That was the tour of February 2020. March, I was in Australia, got my first COVID test stuck in the nose, like these long things that...
The brain stabbing version.
Yeah, and if you don't know what's it never ends. And then I went home and nothing for months. So that was a difficult time. And I've started my Corona projects, like building the barbecue for the terrace and cooking more than I should have and eating more than I should have and drinking and teaching online. And what at the beginning was quite fun. It was also fun to meet people that were like in terrible situations somewhere, didn't have any lessons, didn't have any music and things like this. And I was lucky to have an apartment where I could play and, try to teach. And one other Corona project was then to ask Paavo to give me some conducting advice at his festival here.
When was the first time you were here in Pärnu?
That was 2 years ago. That was in summer 2020, and actually that was one of the countries where you could travel to. One of the few countries at that time. Yeah.
So let me make sure I understood that correctly. You wanted to be here for conducting projects.
I wanted to hear for the conducting class. I wanted to, I'm asked, like, when I tour as a soloist or as chamber, you're always, or a lot of times, asked to do a master class or to do a brass class or to do a brass and wind class or whatever. So I did already conduct a bit, just from experience of seeing conductors. I mean, watching them for now more than 40 years is interesting, and you can see what not to do and what to do sometimes. But translating that to your body is quite difficult. And the preparation of things is also quite difficult. So I thought, like, okay, for Paavo, I asked him if that class would still take place, and he said, yeah, I'm not sure. It's actually in this year only for Estonians, but let me check if I can make an exception. And I said, like, oh, can you maybe, if you play like a Mozart concerto, and then I was
just
coming as a
maneuvering already.
soloist.
Yeah, there you go.
But therefore, I could also take the class.
What's it like working with Paavo?
I love working with him. I mean, now from different perspectives, because I've worked with him in the orchestra, I've worked with him as a soloist, and as a conducting student. So, and it's always very. His personality is just very. He's never giving you the feeling that he's like someone who's like talking from above or something. It's always like taking you serious, taking himself like on the same level as you, talking about things. Is never like, the maestro or whatever. No, not at all.
I wanted to ask you about another conductor for whom I've had lifelong admiration, Claudio Abbado, and your work with him. He selected you for the Luzern Festival Orchestra.
Yeah, that was when he left Berlin after not so many years. How long was he there? 13? Something like this, 12, 13 years, yeah. I came to Berlin in 93 and he left in 2002. That's right, I was playing with him for 9 years. And of course, in that time, the last years, he was quite sick, parts of it, and then he recovered, luckily, and then he asked me to play in this Luzern Festival Orchestra, so I was very honored by that.
People often talk about a certain magic with Claudio Abbado. What was your experience with what made him so special? This
is something you experience in music sometimes, that he had the gift to structure the moments in a Mahler symphony according to the audience expectation in the moment. This is something you cannot sort of like train, but the feeling of at this moment I have the time, or at this moment maybe I better go, and it was always in a flow. This is something that it never really stopped, even if it sometimes was really slow, and sometimes like end of Mahler 9, it was really dying, but anyway, it never stopped somehow, and gestures, beautiful gestures, and fantastic conducting, and he was more or less helping with his conducting he was helping us making chamber music in the orchestra.
Have you observed that any aspect of the musical life has changed during the time that you've been a performer?
There's always change, of course. There's always change. I mean, it's like we're not playing the same. We're playing the same music, but we are not performing the same. I don't know what it is. It's hard to specify, actually.
Do the audiences feel the same?
We have actually, luckily in Germany, a growing audience for symphony concerts. We lose audience for chamber music. So I'm a bit concerned about this, because this is sort of like the most private music making, and I love it.
What about opera?
Opera is different. At the moment, there was actually quite a good response to opera, but now after the crisis, the people are not going back into the opera. It's really hard to see. I was because my wife is working in the opera. At the moment, she's working at the Staatsoper quite a lot as Regieassistenz Abendspielleitung. Don't know what that is in English. So she takes care about who moves where on stage in the performance. But there was a couple of like Fanciulla del West with the best singers in the world, and it was like 60%. So it was really bad. It was sort of like, ooh, yeah. And this was Anja Kampe, Michael Volle, like really great singers. It's like, yeah.
I'm curious to know what's inspiring you these days. Which projects?
Like in the near future.
Yeah.
I was always very interested in contemporary music. So I do have some horn concertos written for me, and I will have some new ones. So Jörg Wiedmann is actually writing for 2024. We'll perform a premiere of his horn concerto in Berlin with Simon Rattle. So I'm very much looking forward for that. And there's 2 more coming, but I can't
TBA,
talk about.
You're
yeah,
right.
but they are. It's just details. But I'm very happy about that.
How about outside of music? What's inspiring you these days?
Good food. I love to go to good restaurants. I love to have a good wine with my good food. Absolutely love that. Like when I'm here, I like to just bike around the woods and the forest and the beach sometimes. We don't have that in Berlin so much. The woods, yes. Flat, yes. No sea. We have some lakes, but it's not the same. It's just like different. Walking my dog through Berlin is nice. Yeah, this is inspiration I get. The music, actually also going like to a festival like here to see performers is of course always an inspiration.
Stefan, thank you so much for being here on the show. It's been a delight to speak with you and to have some insight into your musical life, and we hope to hear many more of your performances.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.